When a wealthy heir invites his maid to a gala to humiliate her, she accepts and arrives as the belle of the ball. But her stunning transformation is just the beginning of a tale of secrets, revenge, and love that changes everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun shone through the tall windows of the Montgomery mansion as Maya Johnson dusted the priceless antiques in the main hall. At 28, she carried herself with quiet dignity, even in her simple grey uniform. Her long dark hair was neatly pulled back, and her warm brown eyes focused on her work as voices echoed from the study. "So can't be serious, Nathan." Charlotte Montgomery's shrill laugh carried through the door. "Inviting the maid to the Somerset Club. Mother will have a fit." Maya's hands stilled on the crystal vase she was cleaning. "Nathan Montgomery IV's deep voice replied with cruel amusement. "Why not? The help should see how the other half lives. Maybe it'll motivate them to better themselves." Maya's cheeks burned, but she kept working. She needed this job to support her teenage sister, Angela. Their parents' death had left them with nothing but debts and memories of better days in Atlanta. The study door swung open. Nathan Montgomery stood there in his perfectly tailored suit, his handsome face twisted in a smirk. At 35, he was Boston's most eligible bachelor since his divorce, but his good looks couldn't hide the bitterness in his eyes. "Johnson," he called out, "I have a proposition for you." Maya turned, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery? The annual charity gala is next Saturday at the Somerset Club. I'd like you to attend." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "As my guest." Behind him, Charlotte covered her mouth to hide her giggle. Maya's heart pounded, but years of her grandmother's etiquette lessons kept her voice steady. "That's very kind, but I'm afraid I'll be working that evening." "I insist," Nathan said. "Consider it paid time off. Unless—" His smile grew wider. "You don't feel comfortable in such surroundings?" Maya met his gaze. If he wanted to humiliate her, he'd have to try harder. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I would be honored to attend." Charlotte's laughter died in her throat at Maya's composed response. Nathan's smile faltered slightly. "Wonderful," he said. "The dress code is black tie, of course. I'm sure you can find something appropriate." After they left, Maya leaned against the wall, her hands shaking. She couldn't afford a gown, and Nathan knew it. But as she pulled out her phone to call her Aunt Ruby, a plan began forming in her mind. That evening, in her small apartment across town, Maya sat with Angela at their tiny kitchen table. Her sister was doing homework while Maya stirred a pot of soup. "You should show them who you really are," Angela said, when Maya told her about the invitation. "Remember when Mom used to take us to the cotillions?" "That was a different life," Maya said softly, but she couldn't help remembering the ballrooms, the dancing lessons, the way her grandmother had taught her to handle any social situation with grace. The phone rang. It was Aunt Ruby, calling from Atlanta. "I heard what that Montgomery boy did." Ruby's rich voice filled the line. "Child, it's time to remind Boston that being rich doesn't make you noble. I'm sending you something your mama wore to her last charity ball." Maya tried to protest, but Ruby wouldn't hear it. "Sometimes," her aunt said, "the best revenge is simply being yourself." A few days later, a package arrived. Inside was a timeless black Chanel gown that Maya remembered from her childhood. As she held it up, tears filled her eyes. The dress wasn't just fabric, it was a piece of who she used to be, who she still was beneath the uniform. Meanwhile, at the Montgomery mansion, Nathan's mother Margaret was reviewing the guest list when a familiar name caught her eye. "Ruby Johnson is sending a representative?" she asked Nathan. "The Ruby Johnson who trained half of Atlanta's society girls?" Nathan frowned. "Johnson? Like our maid?" Margaret's face went pale. "Nathan, what exactly do you know about Maya's background?" "She's the help, Mother. What else matters?" Margaret sat back, remembering a summer 20 years ago in Atlanta, and a secret she'd kept all these years. "Oh, Nathan," she sighed, "you have no idea what you've started." As the week progressed, Charlotte grew increasingly suspicious of Maya's calm acceptance of the invitation. She hired a private investigator to look into the Johnson family's past, not realizing she was opening a door that would change all their lives forever. The night before the gala, Maya stood in her apartment looking at her mother's dress. On her phone was a text from her aunt. "Show them what real class looks like, baby girl." Maya smiled, thinking of her grandmother's favorite saying, "Dignity isn't about who you are. It's about how you carry yourself when people try to tell you who you're not." Tomorrow night would change everything. but not in the way Nathan Montgomery expected. The morning of the gala arrived with dark clouds threatening rain. Charlotte Montgomery sat in her father's old study, staring at the file her private investigator had just delivered. What she found made her hands shake. "This can't be right," she whispered, flipping through the papers. Maya Johnson wasn't just any maid's daughter. Her grandmother had been the Ruby Johnson, the woman who had trained Atlanta's elite for decades. But there was something else, something that made Charlotte's blood run cold. The phone rang, making her jump. It was Nathan. "Have you seen Mother today?" he asked. "She's acting strange. Keeps talking about Atlanta and the summer of 1995. Charlotte clutched the file tighter. "Nathan, there's something you need to know about our maid." But before she could continue, the doorbell rang. Standing on their doorstep was an elegant black woman in her 60s, wearing a designer suit and a stern expression. "I'm Ruby Johnson," she announced, "and we need to talk about Maya and about what really happened to her parents." In the kitchen, Maya was finishing her morning duties when she heard raised voices from the front hall. Her heart stopped when she recognized her aunt's voice. "Aunt Ruby," she called out, hurrying toward the commotion. "What are you doing here?" Ruby stood in the grand entrance hall, facing a pale-faced Margaret Montgomery. The two women stared at each other like they'd seen ghosts. "Margaret," Ruby said coolly. "It's been, what, 20 years?" Margaret gripped the stair railing. "Ruby, I thought you'd retired." "Oh, I did. Right after your family ruined mine." Nathan appeared, at the top of the stairs, his face dark with anger. "What is going on here, Johnson? Do you know this woman?" Before Maya could answer, Charlotte burst out of the study, waving papers. "Nathan, stop. There's something you need to know. Maya's parents, they didn't just die. They were killed, and our father was involved." The room fell silent. Maya felt her world spinning. "What are you talking about?" Ruby stepped forward, her voice heavy with old pain. "Your father discovered something, baby girl. Something about the Montgomerys' shipping business. He was going to expose it, but then that car accident happened. Only it wasn't an accident." Margaret sank onto the stairs, her face in her hands. "I never knew. I swear, I never knew Richard would go that far." Nathan looked between his mother and Ruby, his arrogant facade cracking. "Mother, what are you saying?" "Your father had secrets, Nathan. Dark ones. The Johnsons discovered them, and Richard, he made them disappear. All except little Maya and Angela. And now Maya works in our house, serving the family that destroyed hers." Maya stood frozen, years of questions finally finding answers. "You knew? All this time you knew who I was?" Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I recognized your name when you applied. I thought I could make it right somehow. Protect you the way I failed to protect your parents." Charlotte wasn't finished. She pulled one more paper from the file. "There's more. Angela isn't just Maya's sister. She's my daughter. The baby I gave up for adoption 16 years ago." Maya staggered back. "What? The Johnsons adopted her through a private agency?" Charlotte whispered. "I was so young, I never knew she went to your family." Nathan sat heavily on the stairs beside his mother. His cruel smirk was gone, replaced by shock and confusion. "The gala tonight," he said. "You weren't going to embarrass yourself at all, were you? You probably know more about high society than half our guests." Ruby smiled grimly. Maya was trained by the best, just like her mother. "Tonight wasn't going to be her humiliation, Nathan. It was going to be yours. But now everything's changed," Maya said quietly. She looked at her aunt. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about my parents?" "To protect you, child. But when I heard about this gala invitation, about this man trying to shame you," Ruby shook her head. "It was time for the truth to come out." A sleek black car pulled up outside. Through the window, they could see a woman stepping out. Nathan's ex-wife, Victoria. "Perfect timing," Charlotte muttered. "Now the circus is complete." Maya turned to leave, but Nathan caught her arm. Gone was the cruel employer, replaced by a man facing the collapse of everything he'd believed about his family. "Wait," he said softly. "Please. I know I don't deserve it. But stay. Help me understand." Maya looked at his hand on her arm, then at the faces around her. Margaret's guilt, Charlotte's shock, Ruby's protective anger, and in Nathan's eyes, something she'd never seen before, humility. The door opened, and Victoria walked in, taking in the scene with raised eyebrows. Well," she said, "isn't this cozy? Nathan, darling, we need to talk about your father's old business records. There are some irregularities." Ruby smiled like a cat with cream. "Oh, honey," she said, "you don't know the half of it." Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was about to break in more ways than one, and the gala was still hours away. The Somerset Club glittered like a jewel box that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over Boston's elite as they arrived in their finest clothes, air kisses and fake smiles everywhere you looked. Victoria Montgomery stood near the entrance, in a tight red dress, watching the door like a hawk. "She won't show," she told Charlotte with a smirk. "A maid at the Somerset Club, please?" Charlotte wasn't so sure. After the afternoon's revelations, nothing seemed impossible anymore. She touched the adoption papers in her clutch purse, still, trying to process that Maya's sister Angela, her own daughter, was somewhere out there right now. Nathan paced near the bar, checking his phone every few minutes. After Maya had left the mansion that afternoon, he'd tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer. The weight of his family's sins sat heavy on his shoulders. "Quite a crowd," Margaret Montgomery said, appearing beside him. "Nathan, about your father's business dealings." "Not now, Mother," Nathan muttered, but his mother grabbed his arm. "Yes, now, because Maya's father found proof that your father was smuggling more than just luxury goods on those ships. The accident happened the night before he was supposed to meet with the FBI. Nathan's drink froze halfway to his lips. "What?" "That's what Victoria found in the old records. That's why she came back, to blackmail us. But Ruby Johnson has copies of everything. She's been waiting 20 years to expose the truth." Before Nathan could respond, a murmur swept through the crowd. All heads turned toward the entrance, where a woman stood in a classic black Chanel gown that seemed to float around her. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, diamonds glinting at her ears, family heirlooms that had survived the Johnsons' fall from grace. "My God," Charlotte whispered. "Is that Maya?" It was, but this wasn't the quiet maid who cleaned their house. This was Maya Johnson, granddaughter of Atlanta's most celebrated etiquette coach, daughter of old money and older grace. She moved through the crowd like she'd been born to it, which Nathan now realized she had been. Victoria's face turned as red as her dress. "What is she wearing? That's a vintage Chanel. There were only 3 ever made." "4, Ruby Johnson said, appearing beside her in midnight blue silk. "One belonged to Jackie Kennedy, and one belonged to my sister, Maya's mother." Maya walked straight to Nathan, her head high. The room fell silent, watching them. "Mr. Montgomery," she said clearly, "thank you for the invitation." Nathan struggled to find words. Gone was his cruel arrogance, replaced by genuine regret. "Maya, Save it," Ruby cut in. "We're not here for apologies. Show them the papers, Victoria. Tell everyone what Richard Montgomery really was." Victoria clutched her purse tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Ruby smiled. "Then maybe I should tell them about the night Richard caught you going through his office? The real reason for your divorce." Victoria's face went pale. Nathan turned to his ex-wife in shock. "What's she talking about?" "She was working with the FBI," Maya said quietly, "just like my father. But when he died, she got scared and ran. That's why she married you, Nathan, to get close to the evidence, but she never found it all." "Because I had it," Ruby announced. "Every document, every photo, every piece of proof about Richard Montgomery's smuggling operation. And now it's all going to come out." The other guests were openly staring now, whispers flying. Charlotte stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I want to meet her," she said to Maya. "Angela, my daughter, please." Maya's expression softened. "She's here?" A young girl in a simple blue dress stepped out from behind a column. She had Charlotte's eyes and Maya's quiet grace. Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth. "I didn't know how to tell her," Maya said. "That's why I came tonight. She deserves to know her whole family, the good and the bad." Nathan watched Angela walk toward Charlotte, saw the tears in both their eyes. Then he looked at Maya, really looked at her, and for the first time saw past his own prejudices to the remarkable woman she was. "I've been so blind," he said softly. "So cruel. Can you ever forgive me?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "Forgiveness has to be earned, Mr. Montgomery, just like respect." A commotion at the door drew their attention. FBI agents were coming in, led by a tall man with gray hair. "That would be Agent Roberts," Ruby said calmly. "Right on time." Victoria made a dash for the back exit, but 2 agents were already there. Margaret Montgomery sank into a chair, looking suddenly old. "Mother knew nothing about this," Nathan said quickly to the agents. "My father kept her in the dark." "We know," Agent Roberts said. Mrs. Johnson has been working with us for months getting everything in order. Tonight we just needed all the players in one place. Maya turned to her aunt in surprise. Ruby shrugged. You didn't think I came just for the party, did you, baby girl? As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, the other guests began to leave, eager to spread the gossip about the dramatic scene they'd witnessed. Soon only the main players remained. Nathan, Maya, Charlotte and Angela, Margaret and Ruby. So what happens now? Nathan asked quietly. Maya looked around the grand ballroom, so similar to the ones she'd known in her youth. Now we tell the truth, all of it. And then, Nathan prompted, and then we see what's left to build on. Angela had her head on Charlotte's shoulder, both of them talking softly. Margaret was writing something on a napkin. Account numbers, passwords, everything the FBI would need. And Ruby stood watch over it all, finally seeing justice for her family. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke, rain drumming against the high windows. But inside, the air had cleared at last. The morning after the gala, the Montgomery mansion felt different. The grand rooms that had once seemed so impressive now echoed with uncomfortable truths. Maya arrived early, not as a maid this time, but because Nathan had asked her to come. She found him in the kitchen trying to make coffee. He looked lost among the appliances she'd used every day. The coffee maker's broken, he said, not turning around. I never knew it was broken. It's not broken, Maya said softly. You just have to know how to handle it. She stepped forward, showing him the trick to getting it started. Like everything else I never bothered to learn about, Nathan said bitterly. I was too busy being Richard Montgomery's son to see what was right in front of me. The kitchen. Door swung open. Charlotte walked in with Angela, both of them red-eyed from what had clearly been a long night of talking. Maya, Angela said, running to hug her sister. Charlotte, she wants me to come live with her. Maya's heart squeezed, but she kept her voice steady. Is that what you want? I want us all to be together, Angela said. Can't we find a way? Before Maya could answer, Margaret appeared in the doorway. She looked older than she had yesterday, her perfect makeup gone, her designer clothes replaced by a simple sweater. I've been up all night, she announced, going through Richard's papers. Maya, your father wasn't the only one my husband killed. There were others, people who got too close to his secrets. Nathan gripped the counter so hard his knuckles went white. How many? 3 that I found evidence of. The FBI will find more, I'm sure. Margaret's voice shook. I've written everything down. Agent Roberts is coming this morning. Ruby's car pulled up outside. She'd spent the night at her hotel, making calls to Atlanta, spreading the word that the truth about the Johnsons' fall from grace was finally coming out. Well, she said, surveying the kitchen full of people, isn't this cozy? The mighty Montgomerys, making their own coffee. Aunt Ruby, Maya warned, but Nathan stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, he said formally, I know nothing I say can make up for what my father did to your family, but I want to try to make things right. Ruby raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan to do that? By turning over everything. The company, the assets. They should have been yours 20 years ago. I'm signing it all back to Maya and Angela. Nathan, no, Maya protested. That's not why I know, he interrupted. That's not why you kept working here, not why you put up with my cruelty, but it's the right thing to do. Charlotte spoke up from where she sat with Angela. I want to help too. I have trust funds, property. Stop, Ruby commanded, all of you. Money isn't going to fix this. Trust me, if money could heal hearts, Atlanta society would be the happiest place on earth. Maya nodded. Aunt Ruby's right. What we need is truth, all of it, no more secrets. Then let me start, Margaret said. She pulled a photograph from her sweater pocket, old, creased, showing 2 young women in debutante dresses. This is me and your mother, Maya. We were best friends once, until I chose loyalty to my husband over loyalty to my friend. I've regretted it every day since. Maya took the photo with trembling hands. Her mother looked so young, so happy. I have more, Margaret continued. Albums full of photos, letters. I kept everything. I couldn't save her, but I saved her memories. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. Nathan reached out instinctively to comfort her, then pulled back, unsure if he had the right. But Maya caught his hand. It's okay, she whispered. We all need to learn how to be different people now. The doorbell rang. Agent Roberts and his team right on schedule. But before anyone moved to answer it, Ruby spoke again. Here's what's going to happen, she said firmly. Margaret, you'll tell the FBI everything you know. Nathan, you'll keep running the company, But with Maya on the board of directors, it's time that business had some honest oversight. Charlotte, if Angela wants to know you, that's her choice, but you do it on her terms. And Maya, she looked at her niece, standing tall in yesterday's borrowed confidence. Maya, you'll stop pretending to be less than you are. No more hiding. And me? Nathan asked quietly. Besides losing my father's respect all over again? Ruby's face softened slightly. You'll learn what your father never did. That true worth isn't in your bank account or your last name. It's in how you treat people. The doorbell rang again. Outside, reporters were gathering, drawn by rumors of Victoria's arrest. The storm had passed, but its effects were just beginning to ripple through Boston society. Maya looked around at these people who had been strangers yesterday. Her sister's birth mother, her mother's former best friend, the man who had tried to humiliate her and was now offering her everything. We should answer that, she said. Together. As they walked to the door, Nathan kept hold of her hand. Not possessively, not like he deserved it, but like someone learning what it meant to be humble, to be human. The cameras would flash, the headlines would scream, and Boston's social scene would talk about nothing else for months. But in that moment, in that house where Maya had once been invisible, the future started to feel possible again. Montgomery Empire built on blood money, screamed the Boston Globe's headline. Maya stared at the newspaper on her kitchen table, one of dozens that had appeared over the last week. Next to it lay a more personal piece in the society pages. From Made to Magnate. The Maya Johnson story. The phone rang. Another reporter wanting an interview. Maya let it go to voicemail. She had bigger problems this morning. Angela was moving some of her things to Charlotte's house today, and Maya couldn't. Stop the fear in her heart that she was losing her sister. A knock at the door made her jump. It was Nathan, looking tired and rumpled, nothing like the polished businessman he'd been just days ago. The board wants to vote me out, he said without preamble. They're meeting this afternoon. Maya stepped back to let him in. I know, Ruby called to tell me. Your aunt seems to know everything that happens in Boston these days. She always did. That's how she protected us all these years. Nathan paced her small living room, looking out of place in his expensive suit. I deserve to lose the company. After what my father did. After how I've acted. Stop, Maya said firmly. You're not your father. Aren't I? I treated you just like he would have, looking down on you, trying to humiliate you. And then you changed, Maya pointed out. When did Richard Montgomery ever do that? Before Nathan could respond, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. Angela's asking for you. Please come over. 20 minutes later, Maya and Nathan walked into Charlotte's Beacon Hill townhouse. Angela sat on the stairs, surrounded by boxes. I can't do it, she announced. I can't choose between you. Charlotte appeared from the kitchen, wringing her hands. I told her she doesn't have to. We can find a way to make this work. Of course, we can, Maya assured her sister. Charlotte isn't trying to replace me. She's giving you more family, not taking away what you have. But what about the newspapers? Angela asked. Everyone at school is talking about us. They're saying terrible things about Nathan's father, about what he did to Mum and Dad. Nathan knelt in front of her. Let them talk. What matters is that we're trying to make things right, all of us. The doorbell rang. This time it was Ruby, carrying a thick folder. The board won't be voting anyone out today, she announced, because I just bought controlling interest in Montgomery Industries. Everyone stared at her. How? Nathan asked. With your father's own money, Ruby smiled. The offshore accounts he thought were so well hidden? They're in my name now. Turns out Victoria wasn't the only one who knew where the bodies were buried. She turned to Maya. I'm turning my shares over to you, baby girl. You and Nathan will run the company together, if he's willing to learn how to be a better man than his father. Nathan looked at Maya. I'd be honored if you'll teach me. A car door slammed outside. Margaret Montgomery hurried up the steps, waving a letter. It's from Victoria, she said breathlessly. She's agreed to testify about everything, all of Richard's crimes, all the cover-ups, but she wants something in return. What? Charlotte asked. A chance to tell her side of the story. She says she never meant for anyone to die. She was young, in love with Nathan, but when she found out about Richard's business, she got scared, Maya finished, like my father did. Only she ran away instead of standing up to him. The FBI is offering her a deal, Margaret continued. In exchange for her testimony, they'll recommend a lighter sentence. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. All these years I thought she left me because she didn't love me enough, but she left because she knew what my father was capable of. Love isn't always enough, Ruby said quietly. Sometimes it takes courage too, the courage to face the truth, to change, to forgive. Maya felt Nathan's eyes on her. Since the night of the gala, something had been growing between them, something neither of them had expected. But with all the chaos around them, was it real or just a reaction to everything changing? The press is having a field day with all this, Charlotte said, scrolling through her phone. They're calling it Boston's greatest society scandal. Let them, Ruby declared. Sometimes you need to tear everything down to build something better. Angela picked up one of her boxes. Does this mean I can have 2 bedrooms? Everyone laughed, the tension breaking. This new reality they were building might be messy and complicated, but it was honest, real. You know, Nathan said softly to Maya, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I invited you to that gala. Maya smiled. Even though it ruined your life? It didn't ruin my life, he corrected her. It saved it. Outside, photographers lurked, waiting for the next chapter. In the scandal that had rocked Boston, society. But inside, surrounded by boxes and headlines and complicated new relationships, a different kind of story was unfolding. One about redemption, forgiveness, and the kind of love that grows in the most unexpected places. The courthouse was packed the morning of Victoria's testimony. Maya sat between Nathan and Ruby in the front row, watching her former rival being sworn in. Victoria looked different in her plain navy suit, younger somehow, more vulnerable. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Victoria Ellen Montgomery, formerly Victoria Preston. And can you tell us about the night you discovered Richard Montgomery's illegal activities? Victoria's hands twisted in her. But it was 2 weeks before my wedding to Nathan. I was looking for some old photos in Richard's study when I found the ledgers. The whole courtroom sat in silence as Victoria detailed years of criminal enterprises, smuggling, money laundering, and worse. But it was when she got to the night of the Johnsons' death that Maya felt Nathan reach for her hand. Richard was scared, Victoria testified. David Johnson had evidence, real evidence. He was going to the FBI the next morning. Richard called some people. I didn't know what he was planning. I swear I didn't know they would kill them. Maya squeezed Nathan's hand as Victoria continued. The next morning, when I heard about the accident, I knew. I tried to talk to Richard, but he just smiled and said, problem solved. That's when I knew I had to run. I couldn't marry into that family, couldn't let Nathan become his father. Why didn't you go to the police? The prosecutor asked. Because Richard showed me pictures, surveillance photos of my family, my little sister at college. He said if I ever told anyone, there would be more accidents. In the back of the courtroom, Margaret Montgomery dabbed at her eyes. All those years, she'd blamed Victoria for breaking her son's heart, never knowing the real reason she'd fled. During the lunch break, Maya found Victoria in the courthouse bathroom. I'm sorry, Victoria said immediately. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I am so sorry. You were young, Maya said, scared, like my father was, but he was brave enough to stand up to Richard. I just ran away. And now you're being brave, Maya pointed out. Better late than never. Back in the courtroom, Victoria's testimony continued. By the end of the day, 3 of Richard Montgomery's former business partners had been arrested, and more names were coming out. That evening, Nathan invited everyone back to the mansion. The huge house felt different now, less imposing, more like a home where healing could happen. The company stock is falling, Charlotte reported, checking her phone. The shareholders are panicking. Let them, Ruby said calmly. Maya and Nathan will build something better from the ashes. Angela, who had been quiet all day, suddenly asked, Did you love my father, Victoria, before you found out everything? Victoria looked startled. Yes, she said softly. I did, very much. Then why? Angela struggled with the words. Why didn't you try to save him? The room fell silent. It was the question they'd all been avoiding. Because I was a coward, Victoria admitted. I thought if I ran far enough, fast enough, I could forget what I knew. But you never forget something like that. It haunts you. Nathan moved to stand by Maya. We're not our parents, he said firmly. Not their mistakes, not their crimes, not their fears. We get to choose who we want to be. Maya looked up at him, seeing the man he was becoming, so different from the arrogant boss who had tried to humiliate her just weeks ago. Speaking of choices, Ruby interjected, the board meeting is tomorrow. Maya, are you ready to take your place as co-CEO? Maya hesitated. What if I'm not qualified? Honey, Ruby smiled. You've been running that house for years. The only difference is now you'll have a corner office instead of a cleaning cart. And a partner, Nathan added quietly, if you want one. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't just talking about business. Margaret cleared her throat. I found more photos today, Maya, of your mother's debutante ball. She was wearing that same Chanel dress you wore to the gala. The dress that changed everything, Charlotte mused. No, Maya corrected her. The truth changed. Everything. The dress just got everyone's attention. Victoria stood to leave. I should go. My lawyers want to review tomorrow's testimony. But at the door, she turned back. Nathan, I really did love you. And Maya. He looks at you the way he never looked at me. Like you make him want to be better. After she left, the others drifted away too. Charlotte and Angela to finish setting up Angela's new room, Margaret to her suite, Ruby to make more calls to Atlanta. Soon only, Maya and Nathan remained in the grand foyer where he had once cruelly invited her to the gala. She's right, you know, Nathan said softly. You do make me want to be better. Maya touched his cheek gently. You were always better than you let yourself be. You just needed to remember how. Maya, he leaned closer. I know it's complicated, with our history, with everything happening. Life is complicated, she said. That's what makes it real. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, nothing like the soap opera drama that had brought them to this moment. But it felt right, like a new chapter beginning. Outside, the last of the day's reporters were finally leaving. Tomorrow would bring more headlines, more revelations, more challenges. But tonight, in this house where Maya had once been invisible, two people who had started as enemies were discovering that love doesn't care about social status or family history. It only cares about truth and second chances. The morning Maya walked into Montgomery Industries as co-CEO, the whispers started immediately. Employees who had barely noticed her during her cleaning shifts now stared openly as she strode through. The lobby in a designer suit Ruby had insisted on buying her. Look who's pretending to be somebody, a woman muttered just loud enough to be heard. Maya recognized her as Sandra Porter, Richard Montgomery's former secretary and one of his most loyal defenders. Nathan was waiting in the executive suite, looking nervous but determined. Ready for this? Ready or not, it's happening, Maya replied, noting how the executive staff avoided meeting her eyes. Their first board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. As they entered the conference room, Maya couldn't help remembering how many times she'd cleaned it late at night, emptying trash cans while tired executives ignored her existence. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan began. I know the past few weeks have been difficult. Difficult? James Porter, Sandra's husband and the company's CFO, interrupted. Your father's reputation has been destroyed. Our stock is plummeting and now you expect us to accept a maid as our leader. Watch your tone, Ruby warned from her seat at the table. As majority shareholder, she had every right to be there, but the old guard clearly resented her presence. Mr. Porter, Maya said calmly, I understand your concerns, but this company needs to change. Change? Sandra scoffed from the doorway where she'd been hovering. You mean like how you changed my brother-in-law's testimony? James told me Victoria visited him in jail last night, probably making more deals. Nathan stiffened. What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't know? Sandra smiled nastily. Kevin Porter was one of your father's partners, the ones Victoria named yesterday, and now this gold digger is taking over everything the Montgomerys built. That's enough, Nathan slammed his hand on the table. Maya isn't taking over anything. We're partners. Partners, James sneered. Is that what you call it? The whole city is laughing at you, Nathan. The heir to the Montgomery fortune, seduced by the help. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Margaret Montgomery swept into the room. The only person this city is laughing at, James, is you, she announced, for being stupid enough to think Richard's old guard still has any power here. Sandra gasped. Mrs. Montgomery, surely you can't support this coup. Support it? Margaret smiled. My dear, I engineered it, along with Ruby, of course. Did you really think we'd let Richard's corrupt legacy continue? The room erupted in chaos. Half the board members started shouting, while others sat in stunned silence. If you don't like the new leadership, Ruby said loudly, you're welcome to resign. In fact, she slid a stack of papers across the table. We've prepared severance packages for anyone who feels they can't adjust to the changes. James grabbed the papers, his face red. This is illegal, we'll sue. Go ahead, Maya said quietly. I'm sure the press would love to hear more about Richard Montgomery's inner circle. Victoria's not the only one who kept records, you know. Nathan looked at her in surprise. Maya smiled slightly. You learn a lot when people think you're invisible, like who came to the office late at night, who shredded documents, who made mysterious phone calls. Sandra's face went pale. You were spying on us. No, Maya corrected her. I was doing my job, cleaning up other people's messes. Now I'm just doing it from the top. The door opened again, and Charlotte walked in with Angela. Sorry to interrupt, Charlotte said, not looking sorry at all. But Angela wanted to see where her sister works now. Angela looked around the room with interest. Cool office. Why does everyone look so mad? James Porter stormed out, followed by his wife and several other board members. Nathan watched them go, then turned to the remaining executives. Anyone else, he asked. No one moved. Good, Ruby said briskly. Now let's talk about the future of Montgomery Industries. Maya, would you like to present your ideas for corporate restructuring? Maya stood, pulling out the presentation she'd worked on all weekend. As she began to speak about transparency, ethical business practices, and community investment, she saw Nathan watching her with pride, and something more, something that made her heart skip despite the professional setting. Later that afternoon, in Maya's new corner office, Nathan brought her coffee, correctly made this time. You were amazing in there, he said. I've never seen anyone handle the old guard so perfectly. I had good teachers, Maya smiled, thinking of her grandmother's lessons in grace under pressure. Besides, bullies are all the same, whether they're in designer suits or school playgrounds. I was one of those bullies, Nathan reminded her, softly. And now you're not. Maya touched his hand. That's what matters. A knock at the door made them step apart. It was Angela. Charlotte's taking me shopping for school stuff, she announced, but I wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you, Maya. Mom and Dad would be too. After she left, Nathan pulled Maya into his arms. She's right. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become. What about you? Maya asked. Are you really okay with all these changes? Maya, he said seriously, watching you take your rightful place in this company, seeing how you handle everything with such grace, it makes me fall in love with you more every day. It was the first time he'd said the words. Maya felt tears in her eyes. Even though the whole city is gossiping about us. Let them gossip, Nathan said. We know the truth. And the truth is, I don't care if you're a maid or a CEO or anything in between. I just care that you're you. Outside her office window, Boston's skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in the city, Victoria was probably giving more testimony. James and Sandra Porter were probably plotting their revenge. The press was probably writing more scandalized headlines. But here, in this office that Maya had once cleaned in the dark of night, none of that mattered. What mattered was that love, real love, doesn't see social status or bank accounts. It sees the heart, and sometimes it takes a scandal to show people where their hearts truly belong. You need to see this. Charlotte burst into Maya's office early one morning, waving a tablet. Someone leaked photos to the press. Maya's heart stopped when she saw the images. They were surveillance photos of her and Nathan in intimate moments, having dinner at his house, holding hands in her apartment building, sharing a private kiss in his car. But it was the headlines that made her blood run cold. Gold Digger's Guide, How to Seduce a Billionaire. From Rags to Riches, The Maid Who Stole It All. They're saying I planned everything, Maya whispered, reading the articles. That I deliberately took the job as a maid to get close to the family. That I worked with Victoria to bring down Richard Montgomery. It's ridiculous, Nathan said from the doorway. He looked furious. Everyone knows those photos could only have come from our security system, and guess who was in charge of that? James Porter, Charlotte answered grimly. Ruby arrived minutes later, already on her phone with lawyers. Don't worry, baby girl. We'll sue every paper that printed those lies. But the damage was spreading. Social media was exploding with the story. Old society friends were giving interviews about how they always knew something was off about that Johnson girl. Even some of Montgomery Industries' clients were calling with concerns. Maybe, Maya said quietly when she and Nathan were alone, maybe we should cool things off for a while, for the company's sake. No, Nathan said firmly. That's exactly what they want. To make you doubt yourself, doubt us. But the company needs you. I need you. He took her hands. Maya, I don't care what they say about us. I love you. The office door opened and Sandra Porter walked in without knocking. How sweet, she sneered. But you might want to save the romance for after you see this. She dropped a file on Maya's desk. Inside were more photos, old ones from Maya's debutante days in Atlanta, but these showed her with Kevin Porter, James's brother, at various society events. "Funny how you never mentioned knowing Kevin before," Sandra said, "almost like you were hiding something." Maya felt sick. She had known Kevin. They'd dated briefly in high school before everything fell apart, before her parents died. "This proves nothing," Nathan said, but Sandra was already walking out, smiling like a cat with cream. "The press might disagree," she called over her shoulder, "especially when they learn that Maya knew one of Richard's associates all along. Makes that whole innocent maid story seem a lot less believable, doesn't it?" As soon as she left, Maya turned to Nathan. "I can explain." "You don't have to," he interrupted. "I trust you." But Maya could see the questions in his eyes. She sank into her chair. "Kevin and I dated in high school. It was nothing serious. I was 16, he was the son of one of my father's friends. When my parents died and we lost everything, he never even called. I hadn't thought about him in years, until Victoria named him in her testimony." Nathan finished. "I should have said something then, but it was so long ago, and with everything else happening." The phone rang. Angela crying. The photos had reached her school. "Everyone's saying terrible things," she sobbed. "About you, about us. Some kids are saying our parents deserved what happened to them." Maya grabbed her purse. "I'm coming to get you." But when she reached the school, Charlotte was already there, hugging Angela protectively. "I took care of it," Charlotte said. "Called the principal, threatened lawsuits if they don't control the bullying. Being a Montgomery is good for something, right?" Maya felt tears in her eyes. Just weeks ago, Charlotte had been as snobbish as Sandra Porter. Now she was defending Maya's sister, their sister, like a mama bear. Back at the office, Ruby had news. "Kevin Porter wants to make a deal," she announced. "He'll tell the truth about Richard's operation, confirm that Maya had nothing to do with any of it. But he wants something in return." "What?" Nathan asked. "He wants Maya to visit him in jail, alone." Everyone started protesting at once, but Maya held up her hand. "I'll do it." "Maya, no," Nathan pleaded. "It's too dangerous." "It's a supervised visit in a federal prison," Maya pointed out. "What can he do?" But later that night, alone in her apartment, Maya wasn't so sure. She pulled out an old photo album, finding a picture of herself at 16, smiling next to a young Kevin Porter at some society event. They looked so innocent, so unaware of how their lives would intersect again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember I love you. The real you. Not the maid, not the CEO, just you." Maya touched the screen, wishing she could be as sure as Nathan seemed to be. Because Kevin Porter knew things about her past, things even Ruby didn't know, things that could destroy everything she'd built. Tomorrow, she would face her past in a prison visiting room. But tonight, she had to decide. What secrets was she willing to reveal to protect her future? The rain started falling outside her window, and somewhere in the city, Sandra Porter was probably already planning her next move. The game wasn't over. Yet, in fact, it was about to become much more dangerous. The prison visiting room was cold and grey. Maya sat at a metal table, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. When the guards brought Kevin Porter in, she barely recognized him. The charming boy from her teenage years was gone, replaced by a bitter-looking man in an orange jumpsuit. "Maya Johnson," he said, sitting down. "Or should I say Maya Montgomery? That's where this is heading, isn't it? What do you want, Kevin?" He leaned forward. "You know, when I saw you on the news, I couldn't believe it. Little Maya Johnson, the girl who disappeared after her parents died. And now here you are, taking down Richard Montgomery's empire." "I didn't take down anything," Maya said. "Richard's own crimes did that." "Really?" Kevin smiled coldly. "So you didn't plan any of this? Meeting Victoria years ago in Atlanta, working your way into the Montgomery household?" Maya's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on. You really expect me to believe it's a coincidence that you ended up working for the man who killed your parents?" "I didn't know," Maya whispered. "Not until Victoria testified." "Liar!" Kevin slammed his hand on the table, making the guards step forward. He waved them off. "Sorry, got a little excited there. But Maya, we both know you're not as innocent as you pretend to be." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was a photograph Maya had tried to forget. Herself at 18, standing with Victoria in an Atlanta restaurant. "My sister Sandra found this in my old things," Kevin said. Imagine her surprise. You knew Victoria 2 years before your parents died, before she married Nathan. Care to explain that? Maya's hands shook. It wasn't like that. I met Victoria at a debutante event. We barely spoke. But you remembered her, didn't you, when you saw her picture with Nathan in the society pages? That's why you took the job at the Montgomerys. You were looking for revenge. No, Maya stood up. I needed a job to support Angela, that's all it was. Then why didn't you ever tell Nathan about meeting Victoria? Or about the real reason your parents were investigating Richard Montgomery? Maya sank back into her chair. How do you know about that? Kevin's smile widened. Because your father wasn't just looking into Richard's shipping business. He was looking into all of us. The Porters, the Prestons, everyone involved. And you knew. You helped him organize his files, didn't you? Maya closed her eyes, remembering those late nights at her father's desk. She'd been young, proud to help him with what she thought was just boring paperwork. I was 16, she said softly. I didn't understand what I was seeing. But you kept the files, didn't you? After they died, hidden away somewhere, waiting for the right moment. Is that what this is about, the files? Kevin leaned closer. James wants those files destroyed. Give them to us, and we'll make all this go away. The photos, the press stories, everything. And if I don't, then everyone learns the truth, that you're not some innocent victim. You're a calculating revenge seeker who used Nathan to destroy his family. Maya stood up again. We're done here. But Kevin wasn't finished. One more thing. Remember that night, right after your parents died, when you came to my house? Maya froze. You were so upset, so vulnerable. Kevin's voice dripped with fake sympathy. You told me everything, about the evidence your father had gathered, about his plans to expose everyone, and I told Richard. The world seemed to tilt. What? I was young, stupid, trying to prove myself to the big guys. Kevin shrugged. I didn't think Richard would actually kill them. But hey, at least some good came of it. You got to fall in love with his son. Ironic, isn't it? Maya ran from the visiting room, barely making it to her car before the tears came. Her phone was full of missed calls from Nathan, Ruby, Charlotte. But how could she face any of them now? She drove to the one place she could think clearly, the cemetery where her parents were buried. Standing at their graves, she finally let herself remember everything. The files her father had trusted her with, the night she'd foolishly confided in Kevin, the day she saw Victoria's engagement announcement and recognized her from that long ago debutante party. I didn't plan it, she whispered to the gravestones, but maybe part of me did take that job hoping to find answers. Maya? She turned to find Nathan standing there, his face full of concern. How did you know where to find me? Ruby told me this is where you come when you're troubled. He stepped closer. What happened with Kevin? Maya looked at her parents' graves, then back at the man she loved, the man whose father had ordered her parents' death, the man who deserved the whole truth. There's something I need to tell you, she said, about the night my parents died, about Victoria and the files and everything. Nathan took her hand. I'm listening. Behind them, the sun was setting over Boston's skyline. In her purse, Maya's phone buzzed with another message from Kevin. Time was running out. The truth was about to change everything. Again. But this time Maya was ready to face it. No more secrets, no more hiding. It was time for the final chapter of this story to begin. The old storage unit smelled musty when Maya unlocked it. In the back corner, behind boxes of her parents' belongings, sat a locked filing cabinet she hadn't opened in years. Are you sure about this? Nathan asked, standing beside her. Maya nodded, pulling out a small key she'd worn on a chain around her neck since she was 16. It's time everyone knew the whole truth. The files inside were exactly as she remembered, meticulously organized evidence of years of corruption. Her father's handwriting filled the margins with notes, dates, connections. And there, paper-clipped to the front page, was a photo that made Nathan's breath catch. Richard Montgomery shaking hands with Maya's father at a charity event. They knew each other, Nathan said softly. They were friends once, Maya explained. That's why it hurt my father so much when he discovered what Richard was doing. He felt betrayed. Back at the Montgomery mansion, everyone gathered in the living room. Ruby, Charlotte, Angela, Margaret, and even Victoria, who'd been granted a supervised release to help with the investigation. Kevin Porter called again, Charlotte reported. He's threatening to go to the press with the photo of Maya and Victoria. Let him, Maya said, placing the files on the coffee table. I'm done hiding. Over the next hour, Maya told them everything, how she'd helped her father organize his investigation when she was 16, not realizing what the documents meant. How she'd run to Kevin the night her parents died, desperate for comfort, and unknowingly signed their death warrant by revealing what she knew. How she'd recognized Victoria years later in Nathan's engagement announcement, but convinced herself it was just a coincidence. "I didn't take the job at the mansion for revenge," she finished, "but maybe part of me was looking for answers without even knowing it." Nathan hadn't let go of her hand through the whole story. Now he squeezed it gently. "You were just a kid, Maya. None of this was your fault." "But Kevin's right about one thing," Maya said. "I'm not as innocent as everyone thinks. I kept these files hidden all these years instead of going to the police." "Because Richard threatened what was left of your family," Ruby reminded her. "You were protecting Angela." Victoria picked up one of the files, her face pale. "There's enough evidence here to put everyone away. Not just Richard's inner circle, but dozens of business associates. Important people." "Then that's what we'll do," Nathan said firmly. "We'll take it all to the FBI." "It won't be that simple," Margaret warned. "These people have power, connections. They have secrets," Maya corrected. "And secrets can be exposed." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. James and Sandra Porter stood on the doorstep looking smug. "Time's up," Sandra announced. "Either destroy those files, or tomorrow everyone learns how Maya Johnson orchestrated this whole scandal." "Come in," Maya invited them. "You should hear this too." Inside, Victoria was already on the phone with Agent Roberts. Charlotte had her laptop open to a video call with the Montgomery Industries board. Even Angela was filming everything on her phone. "What is this?" James demanded. "This," Ruby said with satisfaction, "is karma." Over the next few hours, the truth came out, all of it. The FBI arrived to collect the files and take statements. James and Sandra were arrested for obstruction of justice and blackmail. Kevin Porter, calling from prison, agreed to testify against everyone involved in exchange for a reduced sentence. As the sun set over Boston, reporters gathered outside the mansion's gates, drawn by rumors of more revelations in the Montgomery scandal. But inside, something more important was happening. "I want you to have this," Margaret said to Maya, holding out an old velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring. It was Richard's grandmother's. She was a maid who married into the family. Did you know that? The Montgomerys were scandalized then, too. Nathan took the ring, then got down on one knee in front of Maya. "I know this. Might seem crazy," he said, "with everything that's happened, everything we've learned, but I love you, Maya Johnson. The girl who helped her father fight corruption, the woman who cleaned houses to support her sister, the CEO who's helping me build something better from the ashes of my father's crimes. Will you marry me?" Maya looked around the room. At Ruby's proud smile, Charlotte and Angela holding hands, Victoria wiping away tears, Margaret beaming like a mother watching both her children find happiness. "Yes," she said simply, "but I have one condition. Anything. We used my father's files to make things right, not just for my parents, but for everyone Richard Montgomery hurt. We build something good from all this pain." Nathan slipped the ring on her finger. "We will. Together." 6 months later, Maya walked down the aisle at the same church where she'd once attended her parents' funeral. But today was about life, about future, about love winning over hate, and truth triumphing over lies. The society pages would call it the wedding of the year, the heir to the Montgomery fortune marrying his former maid. But the real story was written in the smiles of the people who watched them exchange vows. Ruby, who had protected Maya's secrets until the right time. Charlotte, who had found both a sister and a daughter. Angela, who had gained a whole new family without losing her old one. Victoria, who had finally found the courage to tell the truth. And Margaret, who had learned it's never too late to choose love over loyalty. As Maya and Nathan shared their first dance as husband and wife, the band played an old song about love conquering all. Outside, Boston's elite whispered and gossiped about the scandal that had rocked their world. But inside, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Maya finally felt at peace. She had found justice for her parents. She had protected her sister. She had built something good from the ruins of tragedy. And most importantly, she had found a love that didn't care about social status or family history. A love that saw past uniforms and titles to the heart underneath. "Happy?" Nathan asked, holding her close as they danced. Maya smiled up at him. thinking of how far they'd come from that cruel invitation to a gala that seemed like a lifetime ago. "More than happy," she said. "I'm home." And she was. Because home isn't about mansions or cleaning carts, boardrooms or ballrooms. Home is about love, the kind that survives secrets, overcomes pride, and proves that sometimes the greatest happiness comes from learning to see people for who they really are, not what society says they should be. The end.